Good evening, Chodesh Tov, Chanukah Sameach.
Kodesh Tov, Hanukkah Sameach. Kavod Rav, how are you?
Thank you, Baruch Hashem. Okay. Okay, so we're going to continue with the Bit Yosef and try to finish this. Let's see what we can do here. So it says like this, Batarachi afterwards, Aminan Begema, we say in Gema that the Rava, the Rabbi Zera, Iklu Resh Galuta. So it says, right, that these two rabbis were at the house of the Resh Galuta. You guys know what's Resh Galuta? So in Aramaic, Resh Galuta means the head of the diaspora. Literally, that's what the words mean. So he was like the chief rabbi, of the diaspora. He was like a monarch kind of thing, a monarch in exile. Where was he located? He was in Bavel. He was in the Mesopotamia, there, Iraq. So that was the seat of the kingdom at that time. So anyway, right, they came to his house. This guy was a big shot, wealthy, like monarch, descended from King David. And so the Sadiku Tacha Mikamayu Shadu Lu Distana Leve Resh Galuta Rabba Achal Rabbi Zera Lo Achal. So what happened? That after they removed the food, the table, whatever, uh, they sent them right from the house of the Resh Galuta some treats, whatever, some food, and Rabba ate it, right? Rabbi Zera lo achal. Rabbi Zera didn't eat it, right? So why did one eat the other one didn't eat? It's not because it's not kosher. That's not the reason why. They trusted each other when it comes to that, right? There was no problem with that. The problem was, as we talked about yesterday, that because they were at the end of the meal, so they weren't allowed to eat at that point, right? As we said yesterday, depending on where you are exactly at the end of the meal, right? You can't eat over there, and we said that there's a machloket about that, and so forth and so on. So anyway, let's see what happens. Amar le lo savar mor la mor silek asur min lechol. Right, so he asked him, right? We saw this like similar thing yesterday, similar piece of the Gemara there, right? So he asked him, "What don't you know, right? You don't hold like this that you're not allowed to eat after we finish the meal?" אמר לי, אנן התחת דרש גלותא סמכינן. Right, so you know what he answers him? He says, listen, who told you we finished, right? In other words, what he meant to say was, we're relying on the Resh Galuta, the chief guy, right, chief rabbi there, right? That what? He's going to send us, some dishes afterwards. So in other words, we were expecting this, and therefore we didn't really finish eating yet. We were still expecting some treats from him, some dessert, the Resh Galuta. So right? Who told you we're finished? We're not finished. We're not done yet. That's what he tells them, right? וכיוון שכן, הכל תלוי בהיסח הדעת. So he says, if that's the case, it all depends on, diversion of the mind, right? In other words, you didn't divert your mind because you're still expecting more food to come. האוכל ולא דעת האוכל, ולא נחלקו אלא במה שדרך האורחים להסיח את דעתם. So what are they really arguing about? That what is the way to, divert your mind from eating? In other words, at which point do you divert? ומפני כך סתם הרמב"ם, and therefore he says the Rambam writes in his work, כתב שאם גמר בליבו לאכול משתאות, so Rambam says like this, if he already decided to finish eating, right? He made a decision in his mind. ואחר כך נמלח, and then he changed his mind all of a sudden, right? צריך לחזור וברך. So he does have to bless at that point. Right? Why is that? Because pretty much he's done with the meal, and so therefore he needs another blessing. We mentioned this yesterday, same thing. So, ואחר כך נמלח, צריך לחזור ולברך, ואם לא גמר בליבו מלאכול, אפילו פסק כל היום כולו, אין צריך לברך. But Rambam says, right, as we mentioned yesterday again, that if he didn't decide to finish eating, he's just hanging around, right, shooting the breeze over there in the room where he ate, so he can go on and eat like that all day, no problem, with the same blessing. He doesn't have to bless again. And then we said afterwards, in the Gemara there, that the halacha is not like these opinions, that we just mentioned. Right? So, nearly the Rambam lo garis kechol hane shmatata. So it seems to me, says the Bet Yosef, right, that the Rambam doesn't have this text in his Gemara, like it says by us. Ela hachi garis. Rather, his text was v'leti l'chata hachi. What the Rambam says in his Gemara is that halacha is not like that. Right? So what's the difference between his text and ours? Right? Because the Rambam's text was, I'm sorry, our text says that the halacha is not like any of these opinions. The Rambam's text says the halacha is not like this. So it's a little bit different, right? There are some nuances there that are different there. Ela ki hadi amar Rabbi Chia bar Ashi. Rather we pass like this rabbi what he said. Amar shalosh techifoten. That there are three things you have to do right away. So one of them is, as we said, right? You have to do right away after washing your hands. You have to bless. So what does that mean? In our case, we're talking about blessing Birkat Hamazon. Okay. So it says, it seems like he explains that we're not talking about what we said, Gemar or Silek, that he finished the meal or he removed the food, Asur lechol, that he cannot eat. Rather, it's going on what we said there, that it says there, Besamuch haragil b'shemen mi'akevo, that if a person is accustomed to do oil, then oil, right, prevents him. We'll see what that means. Klomar now explains, right? Because they weren't doing Birkat Hamazon until they first anointed themselves with oil. So he says, right, halacha is not like that. The halacha is that we do right after, right, the washing, we do the blessing, the Birkat Hamazon. So we don't interfere in, right, we don't interrupt there in between with anointing with oil there, because it has to be done right away. The blessing, Birkat Hamazon. ולפי זה, עד Tanya, so it says, according to this, that which we learned in the Braita, Brachot Nun Gimel Amud Bet, Vitem Kedoshim, that you should be holy, it says in the Baikra, Elu Mayim Achronim, that this is talking about the Mayim Achronim, Ki Kadosh Ze Shemen Atov, that's talking about the fine oil, right? So what kind of oil is that, right? They used to anoint themselves, with this like fine oil, like fragrant oil, whatever, something like that. Ani Adonai Elohim zo bracha, and then it's Birkat Hamazon. Tzarich lomar. So, in other words, the verse also implies that there was some kind of anointing with oil before Birkat Hamazon, right? This was like a cultural, ritual kind of thing, They put oil on. That was a big thing in those days, right? Anointing with oil. That was a big fad in those days. Today, it's almost like non-existent, right? We know nobody does this today. Anyway, so today we use like creams, right? Things like this, for the skin. In those days, the oils was a big thing. Okay, so either way, right? לא אתה אלא לגלוי לן דבעינן שמן הטוב ולא כפיד הסדרה תכיוון דנטל ידיו צריך שיברך ולא יפסיק בינתיים בשום דבר. So he says, right, that once he washes his hands, as we said, he shouldn't interrupt with anything, just go straight to Birkat Hamazon. וכן כתב רמב"ם, this is רמב"ם, פרק ז', שמברך ברכת המזון קודם, that what? That he blesses ברכת המזון first, ואחר כך מברך על השמן, and then he blesses on the oil, right? So the oil comes after Birkat Hamazon. Right? הטוב, השמן הטוב, ומפני זה שמעו תכף נטילת ידיים ברכה. By the way, what would you bless on the oil? What blessing would you make?
Is it for smell, Kavod?
Right, I guess it's on the fragrance, right? There's a fragrance there.
Yes.
You're blessing on the fragrance. Right? Okay, nice, right? Nice trick there, whatever it is. So, I'm sorry?
Just the one with the shekakol at the end.
Yeah, so right, that we don't bless shakol on fragrances.
In oil, not in oil. Oh, but that's oil.
We're not talking about eating oil, right? We're talking about anointing.
Oh, okay. Okay, I see.
You know what I mean? Okay, so so yeah, we're it's a fragrant oil, so that gets a blessing of the fragrance. So nowadays, by the way, in our times, we have like perfume and cologne, things like this, right? Instead of oil. The difference is, right, that our perfumes and oils and colognes are not oil-based, they're water-based, There could be some oils in there a little bit, but basically they're water. They're water-based. But in those days, oil was the big thing, Okay. They had, in those days, tremendous technology, with oil, because they were able to do like very, supernatural things with oil. Like, preserving the skin, from wrinkling and all kinds of things like that. It was, it was a big thing in those days. That's how the Egyptians, embalmed their mummies, right? They did it with oil. That's how they did it. And used to preserve the body for like, hundreds of years. It's incredible. Okay, so whatever that is, right? One time I posted about that, I think in the Zohar, something about that, about preserving the body. Yeah, I did. Okay. So anyway, that's how they did it. So oil used to be a big thing. But anyway, right, getting back to our discussion here, שזה שאמרו תכף נטילת ידיים ברכה, אינו עניין לדינות שלנו, לא הזכירו הרמב"ם פרק הנזכר, והזכירו בפרק ו', ויש לדקדק עוד בדברי הרמב"ם, שכתב גמר בליבו מן לאכול או לשתות. So he says, right, that first of all, one thing he mentions here is that which we said, right, that you have to bless right after the washing the hands. He says it's not really pertinent to our discussion here. And the Rambam didn't even mention it. He says, and he says that you can also deduce from the Rambam, shkatav gemar belibo milechol. So he says that he already decided to stop eating, or to drink, and then he changed his mind. So he comes to come back and bless again. So it implies, right, that even that he already decided not to eat, or to drink, he can still eat or drink, right, as we said. But as we said, right, he has to bless on it now. Tehila at first, right? So he says, then, if that's the case, how do you write afterwards, right? In Halacha Chet, he writes over there the Rambam, that if they said, right, let's do Birkat Hamazon, so now they cannot drink anymore until they do Birkat Hamazon. And if they want to now drink again, right, beforehand, before the blessing, or right, either they have to do kiddush, right? And even though they're not allowed to do so, they have to bless again right afterwards. So it's possible that when they said, right, Havlan Benivrich, which means that let's bless, right, Shani, it's different. Why? Because since they accepted already to do the blessing, right, verbally they accepted it, it's considered like they already started the blessing. Okay, and therefore it's not allowed to make an interruption there, at all. But if he decided to stop eating already, or lishtot, or to drink, or rashayu lafsik, he can still do something there, as we said, right? He can still eat and drink. But since he diverted his mind from that already, so then he has to bless first. Right, on what that he's gonna eat and drink. That's what it seems to me, says the Hashiv Divrei Rambam, to reconcile the words of the Rambam. That's how the Beit Yosef wants to explain the Rambam. Okay, it's good. Umash Mali, so it says, implies to me the lo shani le Rambam ben imrotze. The Rambam doesn't differentiate whether he wants to eat or to drink. Right? For him, it's the same thing. We already said yesterday that according to the Ran and the Rabbi Yonah, right, there is a difference between one and the other. But according to Rambam, he says there is none. Shem lo amar havlan benibrech. He didn't say, right, let's bless. Even though he decided to finish, not to eat anymore, but not to drink. You can still eat and drink, as we said. But you have to bless. Okay. If he said, right, let's bless, you're not allowed to eat or drink anymore until it does Birkat Hamazon. Like the Rashbam says. And now what he said regarding saying, right, let's bless, he mentioned drinks but not food. Which is the language of the Gemara. Nakat, right? In other words, he's just using the language of the Gemara. It doesn't mean that there's a difference between them. They're both the same, halachically speaking. It's just that he's using the language of the Gemara. Because we said regarding, right, the story with the Talmidim of Rav, since you already said, right, this let's bless, eat sar lechul and the now you cannot drink anymore. And the same thing also applies to eating as well. Okay, good. So we're almost finished with this. Got one more little piece here. There was a big Beit Yosef here. Long discussion. Wow. So let's move on. One more piece. It says, "V'kash katav Rabbeinu what that which that what the Tur said, the Amar Havlan ben Ivrich, if he said, right, let's bless Have Hesechadat, so it's considered to be like he diverted his mind already away from the food. Just like washing your hands. In other words, my machronim. He says, I already wrote the leta ela the data mefarshim. So that only applies to those opinions, right? Those commentaries. The behavla menim chasu. That when you say, right, let's bless, it's already forbidden. They're called to eat. Ad shevarech birkat hamazon. Until does birkat hamazon. Aval the mefarshim the behavla nivrich mutar. But according to the ones who say, the commentaries that say that when you say let's bless, it's still allowed to eat if you make a new blessing. The whole as long as you bless, tuba. So he says there's a big difference between them. Because if he washed his hands, right, it's forbidden now to eat more. To eat and drink. Even with a blessing, you cannot do it. Until he does birkat hamazon, on what he ate already. Okay, fantastic. So we're finished with this bit, Yosef. We read the Shulchan Aruch last time, but I'm just gonna, repeat it one more time. Make sure we got everything. It's always good to review a little bit. Doesn't hurt. Never hurts to review. Okay. In the old days, right, with the big rabbis, they used to review everything they learned, like many, many times. So they shouldn't forget it. They would do like on the spot 40 times, 50 times, 70 times. Review it like that, like again and again and again until it's stuck in their head. So they shouldn't forget it. Okay, so let's see what we got here. One more time, we'll read this Shulchan Aruch. So there's like the Chazal say that it's in the Gemara, right? A person who reviews 101 times is not the same as the one who reviews 100 times. In other words, 101 is vastly superior to 100. You ever hear this saying in the Gemara? So
Yes, I think you have mentioned about it.
Oh, I did mention it. Okay, okay. At least somebody mentioned it. Okay, so anyway, right.
I think 101 times becomes part of the person or something like that, or no?
Right. So what's the story with that? So the Mikubalim, they explain the Kabbalists, whatever. They explain that Gematria 101 is right the name Michael, right, which happens to be my name. Just a coincidence. Right? Michael is 101. Right? So Michael is 101, that's good. But if you do 100 times, right? What about that? What's the gematria for 100? So there's another angel, right? Which is named the Mas. So the gematria of Mas is 100. Mem is 40. Samech is 60. Right? So if you review 100 times, you're in Mas. If you do 101 times, you're Michael. So what do I care about that? Who cares? So the answer is right that they say that Michael, that angel is his task is to memory. He helps people to remember things. That's one of his jobs, right, to help people to remember. Mas, right? This angel, he is the angel of forgetting. He makes people forget. So that's why, if you do 101, you're like Michael, so you won't forget anymore. But Mas, if you do 100, you'll forget. That's what I said, right? The one who does 101 times is not the same as the one who does 100 times. It's a big difference. Two different angels there going on. Okay. So yeah. So, why do I mention all this? Because, reviewing the Torah is a very important thing, Always good to review. This is what helps you to retain the material, Otherwise, goes in here, comes out there. You don't retain anything like that. Okay, so let's see Shulchan Aruch here. Well, it says, right, that Gamar Seudato, right, if he finishes Seudah, ונטל ידיו מים אחרונים, and he did מים אחרונים. אינו יכול לאכול בלא לשתות. Now you cannot eat or drink, right, as we said, עד שיברך ברכת המזון, until he does ברכת המזון. So we already mentioned yesterday, right, how important it is to do מים אחרונים, or Sunday, whenever that was, right? Very, very important. So don't skip that. Don't do like those Ashkenazim, some of them, who say, oh, the girls don't have to do it, it's okay, they can skip it, blah, 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 blah. Don't go for that stuff. Make sure you do it. Okay. So, as we said, right, that famous Zohar that says, that a person who didn't do my machronim, so when he does Birkat Hamazon, comes like a bad angel, and like prevents his Birkat Hamazon from being accepted. So it's a pretty heavy thing, Your Birkat Hamazon is not going to get very far if you don't do my machronim. So make sure you do that. Okay, so anyway, right, as we said, Eno Yachol Lechol Ushtot, until right, he's not allowed to eat or drink anymore after he does my machonim. Ad shevarech b'kat hamazon. We're going to talk about that later, by the way, by my machonim. Very soon, we're going to get to that. So anyway, right, what about if he just said, right, let's bless, right? So it's considered like diversion of the mind. Right? So therefore, he's not allowed to drink until he blesses on it again. And the same thing with eating as well, according to the Rosh, right? But Rabbeinu Yoberan, they say differently, right? Which is that what? That when it comes to eating, you don't need to bless, right? Right. By the way, this is extra credit question that we learned yesterday. And the question is like this: why is eating different than drinking, according to this opinion? Drinking requires a blessing, and eating does not. What's the difference? So
the eating's covered by the hamotzi, right?
I'm sorry?
Eating's covered by the hamotzi?
Right, but we're done with the meal. Right? So now it's a new ball game. And so, but nevertheless, right, the Ran and the Rabbi Yonah say you don't need to bless now for eating, only for drinking. Why the difference? By the way, it's not only talking about eating bread, it's talking about eating anything. So what's even candy, right? Whatever it is. So what difference does it make? What's the difference? So we said yesterday, right? If you guys remember, I'll remind you, we said, right, that the Ran explains that eating doesn't require a blessing. The reason is because it's keva. That's how we say it in Hebrew, So what does keva mean? So keva means it's something like, permanent, right? So what does that mean? It's like, keva means you sit down, like, for something substantial, a meal, right? That's called keva. So therefore, right, the Ran says you don't have to bless for that. Because in other words, when you eat something basically you're still in that mode of eating, that you were beforehand when you were eating a meal. So therefore, he says, right, you don't need to. When it comes to drinking, which is not keva, what does that mean? It's something like, not so permanent, right? Not so, not so substantial. It's like come and go kind of thing, right? Like a snack kind of thing. So therefore, right, you don't really need to there you need to bless. Why is that? Because it's not really like considered to be a part of the meal so much. So anyway, as we said yesterday, right? What is the halacha? The halacha is like the last opinion, right? The Rabbeinu Yonah and the Rosh, I'm sorry, the Ran, who said that there is a difference between eating and drinking. So for drinking, we should bless, and for eating, we're not going to bless because it's like keva, as we said, right? Keva. Okay, let's move on a little bit. So then he says, he explains this, right? Um, מלאכול, אפילו סילקו השולחן, אם רצה לחזור לאכילה, אינו צריך לברך פעם אחרת, שכל שלא נטל ידיו ולא נסתלק לגמרי מחילה. So that's exactly what he says, right? He explains it in a different way, but same thing. He says, right, that as long as you haven't washed your hands yet, my machronim, you still haven't really finished the meal totally. There's still something left there, the remnant of the meal, right? Something like that. But when it comes to drinking, it's not substantial, so that's something else. That's the story. That's the Shulchan Aruch. Okay. Good. So we're going to the next one. Let's go back to Tur Bet Yosef and see what's going on. Okay. Bet. That which the Torah said, "Umisha somech al shulchan acherim." So yeah, we didn't read this Torah yet, so we have to go back there and read this. Let's see. Don't see it. Let me see if I can do a search. Find this thing. Let's see it. Maybe I'm mistaken. Something. It's not there. Maybe I'm in the wrong chapter in the tour. Let's check that. Yeah, I was in the last chapter. Oh, no wonder. Okay. Yeah, so it says like this. ומי שסומך על שולחן אחרים, אפילו אמר הבלן בניבריך, לא הווה היסח הדעת, עד שיאמר בעל הבית. Right, so this is what we just said, right, in this Gemara that we just read. So what does it say in the Torah? It says, right, that a person who relies on somebody else's table, and so even if he said, let's bless, he still could eat more, so he doesn't need to make a blessing there. It's not really a diversion. So you guys remember what we said in the Gemara about this? We said, right, that there was these rabbis who were receiving food from the Resh Galuta, right? So that's what we're talking about, right? They learned from that Gemara, this thing, that, if you're like, if they're sending you meals, from some other location, sometimes they send you food and stuff, right? So if that's the case, that's like you expect that to come because it comes regularly, and therefore you don't have to bless on that. Even if you said, let's bless, because you were expecting that stuff to come. It's not a surprise. So that's where, what are we talking about? We're talking about when you, right, are fed by others, somebody else is feeding you. That's what we're saying, right? Just like, when I was in the Kollel, in Israel, right, they used to give us like a, free lunch there, so it was like, they would send it, and whatever they sent, we ate, whatever it was, right? So, if something came, whatever, we knew it was coming, right? Whatever, so it wasn't a surprise. Same thing, when you're dependent on others, right, for your dietary needs. That's what we're talking about. So, yeah, so that's the tour. That's the end of the tour there, and so let's go to Bet Yosef and see what he says about that, about the Resh Galuta. So it says here, Ken Katvat Tosfot. That's what it says in Tosfot, Perek Kitzat V'Marchin, in this Brachot Mem Bet Amud Aleph. Ahad Yamar Rabba, that which Rabba said, Ana Natacha the Resh Galuta, right? As we said, right? He was relying on the Resh Galuta to send them food. V'zel leshonam. So this was their language. V'hu de'aminan ki amar havlan v'nivrich asur lemishteh. That's what we write. We say that when he says let's bless, not allowed to drink anymore. Hainu dafka ki amar ba'al habayit. That's only if the host said aval lo oreach, but not when the guest said it. V'chi asurim lekulam. Hainu Yamar balabait. So when are they forbidden to eat? When the host said that, right? Let's bless, because the host is the one who's bringing the food. So if he says let's bless, that means, right, that there's not, no more food is coming, right? Because he's the one who's in charge of that. When you're at his house, right? About bishvil oreach ena nesarim, right? But it says when it comes to the guest, right? If he says that, we don't really care so much about that, because it could be the host will bring more food. Good point. That's what it says in Mordechai. Okay, that's the point there. That's the story there. So that's bet. Let's see, Bet Yosef. Oh, that was Bet Yosef. So 1 second. Yeah. So we're gonna go to Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch, Misha Somech al Shulchan Achim, as we said, right? If you're getting food from some other source, right? Some kind of a rich, right, guy there, right? Sending you over some foods. Afilu Amar Avlam ben Ibrach. Even he said, let's bless, right? Lo haveset dechad. It's not really considered like you diverted your mind. Achi Amar balabait, until the host says that, right? Because the host is the one who's bringing the food. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about, somebody invited you to come eat there, right? So, you really are dependent on him, so when he decides the meal is over, that's when the meal is over, because it's his food. That's what we're saying, right? Okay, good. That's bet. Very simple, right? Very, very straightforward. Let's go to Gimel. Perhaps we can finish this chapter tonight. Very possible. So says the tour, right? Midivrei Rabbeinu Yerucham nireh she'im lo amar havlan ben ivrich. So it's not really the tour; it's Bet Yosef, right? So says Bet Yosef from Rabbeinu Yerucham. It seems that what if he didn't say, right? Let's bless. Mishenatal akos levarech haver zechadat. Once he took the cup, he says to do Mayim Achronim, right? That's already diversion. That's Rabbeinu Yerucham. So it seems like the Shulchan Aruch paskins like this. Let's see in there. I'm sorry, not this one. Not this one. Okay. So it says like this. He didn't say let's bless. And also he didn't wash his hands. Once he takes the cup to bless, right? That's when it's already the meal is over, basically, right? So it seems like he's talking about here. I didn't say one thing right, according to what he says here, right? I told you that it's when he takes the cup to wash, right? But it's not that. He's taking the cup to bless on the wine after the Birkat Hamazon, right? And that's what we're talking about. Once he picks up that cup to bless on that after Birkat Hamazon. In the old days, right, this was a big thing, they would do Birkat Hamazon with a cup of wine in their hand, and then they would bless and drink it afterwards. Today, we don't do it so much, unless you have 3 people or more, right? Then you should do it. Three males. If you have 3 males, then we do it. Otherwise, nobody does it, and you're not even supposed to do it. According to the Zohar says you have to have 3 people for that. So, but once he took that cup of wine, right, that he's going to for Birkat Hamazon. So that's it. It's over, right? We're done, right? But nevertheless, right, it's not like washing your hands. It's like saying Havna ben Ivrich, right? It's like saying let's bless, So that means if you wanted to eat or drink more, as we said, right, you would have to. Drinking would require a blessing, maybe not eating, right? According to the Ran and the Ben Yonah. Okay, so we got one more. Right, perfect timing. Let's see if we can finish it off. Right, I already have explosions coming over here. My neighborhood is exploding. I feel like I'm in the Galilee. No, right? I feel the same feeling. Getting rockets. Rockets are coming in here. Okay, so yeah. So it says here in Daled, Kataba Kolbo B'Shem Aram. It says this rabbi, name of this rabbi, Kishadam Nichnas Lebet Chavero, if a person goes right as a guest, to somebody's house, V'yesh Sham Chaburot Harbe, and there's like several groups there, Sheochlim, they're eating there. V'chol echad moshit lo koso mevorech al kol echad v'echad. So each one is like giving him his cup. So he says he has to bless on each one. Borei Priyat Gefen. Borei Priyat Gefen. He has to make a blessing on each one. Ki b'chol pam hu nimlach. Right. So what's the reason for this? Why does he have to bless on each one? Because these are different groups. Each group is like separate. So when they give you to drink, it's like it's like something new. You weren't expecting it. So therefore, in a case like that, when this happens by us, like in our times, let's say you went to a hotel, right? Like a kosher hotel, like the ones they have in Israel. So what happens is, right, that there's like several groups there in the dining room, each one having their own little get together, right, over there, eating their Shabbat meal. So what happens is, right, that each one has their own wine, bottles of wine and so forth and so on, right? So, if that other group will give you like a cup of wine, right, you weren't expecting that. So therefore, right, you have to bless on that. So that's what he's saying, right? Something like that. Because you thought you were going to be exclusively in your group, not right, taking from their group. Okay. That's interesting. So let's see Shulchan Aruch. So it says like this: when a person goes into his friend's house, there's several groups going on there, right? Each one's giving a cup of wine. So there is one that says you have to bless on each one, right? As we said, separately, because you weren't expecting these things. Because everything is like a new event there going on. Okay. There's one more. Maybe we can knock off this one too. Knock it off. We can knock it off. Okay. Actually, there's two more. Okay, so I guess we'll do these two tomorrow, B'ezrat Hashem. We got two more. I thought that was the end of it, but this was also a surprise. I have to make a new blessing on these two, right? I wasn't expecting them. It needs a new blessing here. So B'ezrat Hashem, we'll pick it up tomorrow. Thanks for coming. Be blessed to dwell in health and happiness. Laila Tov, Chazak Baruch, Chodesh Tov, and Chanukah Sameach.
Thank you so much.
Tomorrow, B'ezrat Hashem.
Thank you, Rabbi.
God bless.